Hello, Symposiast. I'm Dr. Angela Puca, Religious Studies PhD and University Lecturer, and this is your online resource for the academic study of magic, esotericism, paganism, shamanism, and all things occult. Now, this is a video that I've been obsessed with to research for and to publish. And how can I start? So, first of all, as you guys know, I never really share my political views or my personal beliefs or even my religious beliefs on this channel. It might change in the future, but it's not changing now. So, even though I'm still not going to share my political views, I cannot deny the fact that the recent events in the world have massively affected me and really shaken me. And I feel like one of the ways that I was able to cope with it was to research this video for you guys. I thought that I might feel powerless in many ways, but at least one thing that I can do is provide education for people. And I know that what you guys are interested in is esotericism. So today's topic is going to be about war magic or magic in wartime, or how esotericism has been employed through history for the purpose of war, winning a war, protecting from war circumstances. So this is going to be the topic of this episode. I will focus today on the historical side and what the sources tell us. In some cases, it's going to be based on primary sources because there are only primary sources account, like when we're going to talk about the Operation Con of Power by Gerald Gardner or the Magical Battle of Britain by Dion Fortune. So there are cases where the only accounts we have are primary sources, which means sources that are written by practitioners. And otherwise, I will also try to use to the best of my knowledge and also to the best of the availability of actual academic sources. I will use those ones as well. So this is going to be the topic for today. And so it's going to be primarily theoretical and historical. And then next week, we will have a live stream where we will cover more the practical side. And so practical accounts of what makes war magic or magic in time of war or political magic, however we can call it. Let me know in the comments if you have a better term for this, because at the moment the only terminology that I can think of is war magic. But next week, we're going to have a live stream and discuss the practical side. So, what makes a ritual effective and what types of political magic or magic might be more effective, looking at reports from practitioners and both from the past and the present. Please share this video to everybody so that they will have more knowledge on the topic, and also come along for the live stream so that you can participate in the discussion, because I definitely want to know what you guys think about that as well. So yeah, before we dive in, I have to remind you to do a bit of symposium keeping. That this project is brought to you by you. So if you have the means and want to support this project, I would really, really appreciate it if you'd consider doing so by sending donations on PayPal, joining my fantastic patron community. By the way, thanks to my patrons, because I was about to forget to say that. Thanks to my patrons, because I did post on my Patreon sort of a poll or a question asking them what they thought about war magic and whether they had any sources to recommend. So they definitely helped to build up the bibliography for this video. And thanks to Andrew Rattenmeyer, who's my research assistant as well. So please consider joining my Patreon community. You will find like-minded, esoterically inclined and academically inclined, fantastic people that you will adore just as much as I do. And also you can support me on Ko-fi, becoming a member here on YouTube, super thanking me in the comments, and so on and so forth. You find all the links in the bio, the info box, and everywhere if you want to do so. Thanks for considering. And now let's start this topic, and let's hope that it helps you as much as it's helping me to channel the anxiety from these circumstances. Let's start. Magic has long been an element of warfare, shaping strategy, morale, and perceptions of victory. Across history, military leaders have relied on divination, protective charms, and ritual magic to influence battles and secure supernatural favor. From Mesopotamian war omens and Greek seers to medieval knights invoking divine protection, magic has been seen as a force capable of shaping the outcome of conflicts. Magical warfare was also central to resistance movements. Indigenous fighters during European colonial expansion employed spiritual protections and rituals, believing they could render them invulnerable. Even in the 20th century, occult practices persisted, with Britain's Magical Battle of Britain and Operation Cone of Power, seeking to psychically deter Nazi aggression. Meanwhile, figures like Helen Duncan highlighted wartime fears over supernatural knowledge and state security. So, let's explore how magic has been used throughout history to win, affect, and protect in warfare time. And these are some of the books that will be used and have been used to prepare for this episode. And I've already explained about primary sources that we will have to rely more heavily on primary sources for this episode because we have limited academic scholarship. And I'll do my best to interpret them in the best way that I can. The intersection of magic and warfare in the ancient world reveals the extent to which military success was perceived as contingent to divine favor, supernatural insight, and esoteric interventions. Ancient civilizations developed sophisticated systems of divination, magical rituals, and sacred warfare practices designed to influence battle outcomes. Whether through celestial omens, sacrificial rites, or protective enchantments, magic was integrated into military campaigns at both the strategic and tactical level. Magic and divination played a crucial role in Mesopotamian warfare, where kings and military leaders sought to align their actions with the will of the gods. The Neo Assyrian and Babylonian states institutionalized divinatory practices as an essential part of military decision making. One of the primary methods used was exespicy, the examination of the entrails of sacrificed animals, particularly the liver, to determine divine favor or displeasure before engaging in battle. This practice was rooted in the belief that celestial forces communicated through the microcosm of the animal body, offering insight into the consequences of proposed military actions. The gods Shamash and Adad were frequently invoked in Mesopotamian divination, as they were considered divine arbiters of justice and cosmic order. Shamash, the sun god, was believed to illuminate the truth, while Adad, the storm god, controlled omens linked to weather patterns and natural phenomena. The interpretation of these signs was conducted by professional diviners known as Baru, who held significant influence over royal courts. If the omens were unfavorable, Mesopotamian kings undertook elaborate purification rituals known as Namburbi, designed to negate the predicted misfortune and realign the campaign with divine will. These rituals might include the construction of substitute figures to absorb negative fate or the recitation of incantations to redirect malign spiritual influences. Beyond divination, Mesopotamian war rituals included rites intended to protect warriors and ensure the success of military ventures. Spells for battlefield invulnerability were common, with inscriptions detailing the use of enchanted weapons, amulets, and protective talismans. The Esgar Me or battle series contained incantations meant to fortify soldiers against harm, invoking divine intervention to turn arrows and swords away from the wearer. Such rituals show the practical applications of magic within the Mesopotamian military structure, where esoteric practices were deployed to reinforce morale and mitigate fear. In ancient Greece, divination was regarded as an indispensable component of military affairs. Greek generals and statesmen frequently consulted seers, mantes, before embarking on military campaigns, believing that divine forces shaped the outcomes of human conflicts. Unlike the Mesopotamians, whose divinatory practices were largely rooted in hepatoscopy, the Greeks employed a wide range of omens, including the observation of birds, ornithomancy, celestial alignments, astromancy, and the interpretation of prophetic dreams, oneiromancy. One of the most significant divinatory rites in Greek warfare was sphagia, the ritual sacrifice of an animal, often a ram or a bull, before a battle. The Greeks believed that an animal's final movements and the appearance of its blood could reveal whether the gods favored a military endeavor. If the omens were deemed unfavorable, commanders might delay or even abandon a campaign. The mantes themselves held a liminal role within Greek military structures. Unlike priests, who operated within temple context, seers accompanied armies into battle, offering real time interpretations of omens that could influence battlefield tactics. The historian Xenophon recounts several instances where Greek commanders modified their strategies based on the counsel of seers, demonstrating the extent to which magical knowledge was embedded in military decision making. Apart from divination, Greek soldiers employed magical means for personal protection. Amulets inscribed with protective spells were common, as were invocations of deities such as Ares, Athena, and Zeus Soter, or Zeus, which means Zeus the Savior, for battlefield success. The belief in supernatural intervention extended to the afterlife, with fallen warriors often buried with charms and inscribed tablets intended to secure their passage into a favorable posthumous existence. Greek warfare also incorporated magical hostility, where opponents attempted to curse or spiritually weaken their enemies before battle. The fictiones, curse tablets, have been found in archaeological contexts, detailing spells designed to bind the strength of rivals or invoke divine wrath upon enemy armies. These practices let us see the dual nature of war magic, both protective and aggressive within Greek military traditions. The medieval and early modern periods witnessed a complex interplay between magic, warfare, and religious authority. While Christianity increasingly sought to delegitimize magical practices through doctrinal and legal frameworks, elements of ritual magic, divination, and esoteric traditions remained embedded within military and political spheres. This era saw the rise of sacred warfare, in which battles were fought under divine mandates, as well as the continued presence of cunning folk, alchemists, and occult advisors in military courts. From the Crusades to the development of state sponsored magical operations, war and magic remained deeply intertwined, operating within an evolving landscape of belief, heresy, and political expediency. The Crusades from the 11th to the 13th century epitomized the fusion of war and religion, with Christian knights and commanders engaging in what was perceived as a divinely sanctioned military struggle. Beyond theological justifications, crusaders employed a variety of magical and esoteric practices to secure victory. Holy relics such as the True Cross were carried into battle, believed to offer divine protection and enhance the morale of Christian forces. Pilgrimage sites, particularly Jerusalem, became focal points for the consecration of weapons and soldiers, which showed really the perception that military engagements were guided by supernatural forces. Medieval chronicles document the use of sacred inscriptions and enchanted objects in battle. Crusaders inscribed Latin prayers and biblical verses onto their swords, shields, and armors, often invoking divine intervention to turn the tide of war. Such practices were not exclusive to Christians. Islamic warriors similarly engaged in esoteric warfare, employing Quranic inscriptions, Sufi mystical practices, and divinatory art to seek victory. The widespread belief in divine favor really shows us the extent to which medieval warfare was perceived as operating within a supernatural framework, where success or failure was contingent on both martial prowess and spiritual alignment. Beyond battlefield rituals, the Crusades were accompanied by apocalyptic prophecies and visionary experiences, often guiding military decisions. The belief that certain individuals possessed the ability to foresee the outcomes of battles or that divine messengers revealed strategic insights was a recurring theme. This era saw the rise of military saints and warrior mystics, individuals who combined religious devotion with martial leadership, further embedding magic within the fabric of war. While ecclesiastical authorities condemned many magical practices, cunning folk, which are folk magicians and healers, continued to serve soldiers and mercenaries throughout the medieval and early modern periods. These practitioners provided amulets, charms, and protective spells designed to shield warriors from harm. The belief in enchanted armors and bulletproofing magic was widespread, with soldiers seeking out cunning folk to receive blessings or undergo protective rituals before battle. Such magical protections were not purely psychological. They reflected a genuine belief in the ability of certain individuals to manipulate supernatural forces. Soldiers frequently carried talismans inscribed with planetary symbols, runic inscriptions, or invocations to saints believed to confer invulnerability. Alchemical texts of the period contain recipes for invincibility potions and metallurgical enchantments intended to harden armor beyond its natural capabilities. The role of cunning folk extended beyond individual protection. Some were believed to influence entire battles through weather magic, cursing enemy forces, or invoking spirits to guide the course of war. The fear of such practices led to widespread accusations of battlefield sorcery, with both Catholic and Protestant authorities persecuting individuals suspected of using magical means to alter military outcomes. John Dee, the renowned Elizabethan mathematician, astrologer, and occultist, played a significant yet often overlooked role in England's defense against the Spanish Armada in 1588. As an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, Dee was, according to his accounts and other practitioners' accounts, instrumental in blending esoteric knowledge with statecraft, using his expertise in astrology, alchemy, and hermetic magic to influence military strategy and national defense. Dee was a firm believer in the concept of England as a divinely chosen nation, destined to rule the seas and establish a great empire. He famously coined the term British Empire, envisioning an expansive and spiritually ordained dominion. His magical and astrological calculations were used to determine the most auspicious times for launching naval operations, and he reportedly advised Elizabeth on the best moment to prepare England's defenses against the Spanish threat. One of the most persistent legends surrounding Dee's role in the Spanish Armada War is his alleged use of Enochian magic, a complex system of angelic communication that he developed alongside the medium Edward Kelly. It has been suggested that these angelic messages warned of a great Catholic threat to England, reinforcing Elizabeth's resolve against Spain. Some accounts claim that Dee performed protective rituals along the English coastline, invoking supernatural forces to safeguard the realm from invasion. While these claims remain speculative, they align with the broader Renaissance belief that magic could influence geopolitical events. A more concrete contribution Dee made to the Armada's defeat was his astrological predictions. He was consulted about celestial omens and their implications for England's security. By advising Elizabeth and her court that the alignment of the stars was in England's favor and that Spain's campaign would falter, he bolstered national morale and reinforced the perception that divine providence was on the side of the English navy. The storm that ultimately scattered and wrecked much of the Spanish Armada was widely interpreted as divine intervention, fulfilling these prognostications. Some later writers speculated that these magical workings, whether through ritual astrology or divine petition, played a role in summoning the storm that aided England's victory. While mainstream historians attribute the Armada's failure to strategic errors and inclement weather, the perception of magic's influence persisted in Elizabethan culture and reinforced Dee's reputation as a scholar whose occult knowledge had served the nation in its hour of need. Some later occultists, particularly in the 19th and 20th century, expanded on this legend, suggesting that Dee may have performed an esoteric working to invoke angelic intervention against the Spanish fleet. However, these claims are speculative and do not appear in Dee's own documented writings. While he certainly used his esoteric knowledge to advise Elizabeth I and her government, whether he actively attempted to influence the weather through Enochian magic remains unproven. The early modern period also saw increased fear and prosecution of battlefield witchcraft. The association between witches and military disasters became a recurring theme in European witch trials, with accusations that sorcery was responsible for failed campaigns, unexpected storms, and the deaths of key military figures. The fear of witches infiltrating armies led to widespread purges, with women and men accused of casting spells that weakened soldiers, spoiled provisions, or cursed entire regiments. One of the most famous cases of military witchcraft persecution occurred during the 30 Years' War, where opposing factions accused one another of employing sorcerers to disrupt enemy forces. In some instances, suspected witches were forcibly conscripted into military service, expected to use their supposed magical abilities to benefit their captors. The blending of folk magic, religious zealotry, and military superstition contributed to the widespread belief that war was not merely a contest of arms, but also a battle between esoteric forces. The 19th and 20th centuries marked a period of rapid technological advancements in warfare, yet magical and esoteric traditions persisted in shaping military strategies, national defense, and resistance movements. Even as scientific rationalism became increasingly dominant, belief in the esoteric occult warfare and mystical interventions remained deeply embedded within military and state structures. This period witnessed the use of magic in colonial conflicts, the esoteric ambitions of authoritarian regimes, and the incorporation of occult knowledge into wartime psychological operations. Additionally, magical resistance movements emerged in response to imperialist aggression. During the European imperial expansion into Africa, indigenous magical traditions played a crucial role in resistance movements against colonial forces. European military officers frequently encountered African spiritual practices that blended magic, religion, and political power to resist foreign domination. Indigenous warriors relied on magical charms, protective talismans, and ritual invocations to enhance their combat effectiveness and instill fear in their enemies. The Zulu resistance, for instance, involved warriors anointing themselves with herbal preparations believed to make them impervious to bullets. Similar practices were observed among the Shona and Ndebele fighters against British colonial forces, where spiritual leaders conducted war rituals to summon ancestral spirits for protection and guidance. European colonialists, in turn, attempted to suppress these magical practices, often framing them as superstitious and barbaric. However, British and French military officers also documented their own soldiers adopting local charms and engaging in ritualistic behaviors. The colonial authorities' response to magical resistance was twofold. On the one hand, they attempted to undermine indigenous spiritual leaders by outlawing their practices and portraying them as frauds or criminals. On the other hand, colonial administrators sometimes sought to exploit local magical beliefs to their advantage. For example, British and French colonial officers occasionally employed counter magic tactics, enlisting their own religious figures to perform rituals aimed at neutralizing indigenous spiritual resistance. The 20th century saw the emergence of authoritarian regimes that incorporated elements of the occult into their ideological and military frameworks. The Nazi regime, in particular, exhibited a deep fascination with esoteric traditions, including astrology, rune magic, and the mythologization of Aryan spiritual supremacy. Heinrich Himmler, leader of the SS, promoted a vision of occult warfare in which ancient mystical traditions were revived to reinforce the regime's belief in its divine destiny. The SS's Achnerbe Institute, established to research Germanic occult history, was involved in various esoteric projects, including attempts to harness occult forces for military advantage. Nazi leaders sought to appropriate ancient magical symbols, such as the swastika, as part of their ideological narrative, believing that these symbols carried metaphysical power. The influence of astrology was particularly evident in Adolf Hitler's inner circle, with key military decisions allegedly being guided by astrological forecasts. For instance, Hitler's delay in launching Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, has been attributed to astrological consultations. The Nazi obsession with the occult was not merely a matter of belief, but also influenced practical military operations. There were alleged reports of the SS conducting psychic experiments, remote viewing trials, and attempts to develop esoteric technologies based on alchemical and mystical principles. However, as the war progressed, the limitations of these occult endeavors became apparent, and the reliance on esoteric guidance ultimately contributed to strategic miscalculations. While Nazi Germany's engagement with the occult has been somewhat studied, similar esoteric influences were present in other totalitarian regimes. The Soviet Union, despite its official rejection of religion and superstition, allegedly conducted secret research into paranormal phenomena, psychic espionage, and mind control techniques. Soviet military scientists are alleged to have explored telepathic communications as a means of intelligence gathering, and there are allegedly reports of psychic training programs aimed at enhancing the abilities of spies and military operatives. And as always, you can see that my sources are on screen. So in case you want to check where the information comes from, you see on the slide, and you'll see the full references in the bibliography at the end. Now let's go to my favorite one. My favorite word magic is John Fortune. We will talk more about that in next week's more practical episode, live stream episode. So don't forget to tune in for that. While authoritarian regimes such as Nazi Germany explored the potential of occult warfare for strategic and ideological purposes, Britain saw the mobilization of esoteric practitioners in defense against Nazi aggression. One of the most notable figures in this occult war effort was John Fortune, a prominent British occultist and founder of the Society of the Inner Light. Fortune orchestrated what became known as the Magical Battle of Britain, a series of psychic rituals intended to create a metaphysical barrier against German invasion and to strengthen Britain's collective resilience in the face of war. I have a dedicated Magus lecture on this on my Patreon in case you want to catch it up. It is available at Magus level or higher tiers. Fortune's esoteric operations, which began in 1940, were based on the belief that spiritual warfare could be used as a tool to protect the nation, not only on a psychological level, but on an energetic plane. She and her group of trained occultists engaged in weekly meditative and visualization rituals designed to summon protective forces and channel divine energies in defense of Britain. These sessions often invoked archetypal and mythic figures such as King Arthur, Merlin, and angelic beings, drawing upon the rich esoteric and legendary traditions of the British Isles. In Fortune's view, these figures were more than symbolic. They were thought to embody powerful spiritual forces that could be harnessed to fortify Britain's spiritual will against Nazi aggression. The rituals were conducted in secrecy, with members of the Society of the Inner Light receiving detailed instructions via newsletter, which outlined the focus of each week's meditation. The participants, dispersed across different locations, would synchronize their efforts, collectively channeling protective energies and visualizing a psychic fortress encircling the British Isles. The emphasis was on raising the nation's vibrational frequency and countering the destructive influence of Nazi occult operations, which some believed were actively being conducted by the Third Reich. While there is no empirical evidence to measure the effectiveness of these rituals, many participants believed that their collective efforts contributed to the resilience of the British war effort. particularly in terms of moral and psychological endurance. Fortune's magical Battle of Britain represents an important example of how esoteric practitioners perceive themselves as active participants in the war, engaging in a parallel struggle that ran alongside conventional military operations. These efforts were not just about spiritual warfare in an abstract sense, they were designed to strengthen the determination and resolve of the British people, politicians, military, everyone. Fortune herself described the rituals as an inner war effort, aligning the spiritual defense of Britain with the broader national resistance against German military aggression. Beyond the activities of Fortune and her circle, other occultists and psychics in Britain also claimed to have played a role in wartime defense. The British government was not entirely indifferent to these efforts. Intelligence agencies were aware of various esoteric groups and monitored individuals suspected of possessing paranormal abilities that could either aid or threaten national security. The intersection of occultism and military intelligence is particularly evident in the case of Helen Duncan, a Scottish medium whose wartime seances attracted the attention of British authorities. Duncan's case is one of the most controversial examples of wartime anxiety over esoteric knowledge. A well known spiritualist, Duncan conducted seances in which she allegedly communicated with the spirits of deceased sailors and military personnel. In 1941, one of her seances reportedly revealed the sinking of HMS Barham, a fact that had not yet been publicly disclosed due to wartime secrecy. This alarmed British intelligence, leading to suspicions that Duncan was either a security risk or had access to classified information through supernatural means. In 1944, she was arrested under the archaic Witchcraft Act of 1735, which was still in force at the time, and was convicted on charges of fraudulent spiritual activity. Her imprisonment shows how the British government remained deeply concerned about the potential for occult practices to intersect with national security. Duncan's trial underscores the persistent tension between supernatural belief and wartime intelligence. While some viewed her as a fraud, others saw her prosecution as an attempt to suppress spiritualist activities that might inadvertently disclose sensitive military secrets. The case also illustrates the broader wartime fear that unconventional and esoteric knowledge, whether through psychic intuition, mediumship, or occult practice, could potentially be weaponized or misused in ways that were difficult to regulate. The magical Battle of Britain, alongside other wartime occult activities, reveals how deeply embedded esoteric traditions remained within the national consciousness, even in an era dominated by technological warfare. While the rationalist framework of military strategy focused on conventional tactics, figures like Fortune and Duncan operated in a parallel dimension of war, believing that spiritual forces played a critical role in shaping historical events. Whether or not these efforts had tangible effect on the war's outcome, they still reveal a broader cultural and psychological dimension of conflict, where the unseen and the mystical were mobilized in defense of the nation. Now, another of my favorite ones, the Operation Cone of Power. One of the most enigmatic and debated instances of wartime magic is Operation Cone of Power, a ritual allegedly performed by British Wiccans, including Gerald Gardner, in 1940. This operation is said to have been conducted as a magical defense against Nazi Germany, specifically designed to influence Adolf Hitler's strategic decisions and deter the planned invasion of Britain. According to Gardner and later accounts within the Wiccan community, this ritual was intended to psychically manipulate the Nazi leadership, instilling confusion, hesitation, and strategic miscalculations in their decision-making processes. The ritual was purportedly performed outdoors in a secluded natural setting, under the cover of night. Participants gathered in a circle, engaging in an intense and highly energized magical working that involved collective chanting, drumming, and visualization techniques. The central focus of the ritual was the raising of a cone of power, a well documented Wiccan magical technique in which practitioners generate and direct a concentrated force of psychic energy towards a specific target. In this case, the target was Hitler and his closest military advisors, with the intent of clouding their judgment and instilling doubt about the feasibility of an invasion of Britain. Gerald Gardner later claimed that the Operation Cone of Power was in line with an older tradition of wartime magic, suggesting that similar rituals had been performed by English witches during previous invasions, including the Spanish Armada in 1588 and the Napoleonic Wars in the early 19th century. These historical parallels reinforce the belief among British occultists that magical intervention had played a role in national defense throughout history, making their actions during World War II a continuation of this esoteric legacy. The operation itself reportedly required an immense expenditure of energy from its participants, many of whom were elderly members of the Wiccan community. It is said that some practitioners collapsed from exhaustion following the ritual, and there were even claims that a few did not survive the winter due to the physical toll it took on them. This aspect of the narrative has led some researchers to speculate on the sincerity and dedication of those involved, and really highlights the deep conviction with which they approached their magical work. The supposed effectiveness of Operation Cone of Power remains highly contested. Hitler's reluctance to proceed with Operation Sea Lion, the planned invasion of Britain, is well documented in military history, but mainstream scholars attribute this to failure of the Luftwaffe in the Battle of Britain, logical difficulties, and Hitler's strategic shift towards the invasion of the Soviet Union. However, from the perspective of British occultists, the fact that Hitler never launched an invasion was seen as evidence that their magic had been successful. And this belief is not unusual within esoteric traditions, where magical efficacy is often measured through perceived synchronicities. Beyond its historical veracity, Operation Cone of Power represents a remarkable example of how esoteric practitioners viewed themselves as active participants in national defense. Rather than being passive observers of the war, these Wiccans saw their magical practice as a direct means of engaging in wartime resistance, which I find very commendable, if I have to be honest. Their actions also highlight the intersection between folk magic, ceremonial practice, and collective intention in shaping historical events. Even if the operation's direct impact on Hitler's decision making remains speculative, the ritual undeniably served as a powerful psychological and spiritual reinforcement for those who participated in it. And who knows, maybe it worked. I mean, he didn't invade Britain after all. In a broader sense, Operation Cone of Power also illustrates the role of historic communities in wartime Britain. While figures like Dion Fortune and the Society of the Inner Light worked on psychic defense through structured meditations and visualization practices, Gardner and his circle represented a more folk magical, earth based approach to the same goal. Both groups shared the belief that spiritual warfare could manifest tangible results in the physical world, and reinforced the notion that the war was being fought on multiple planes, not just the material, but also the metaphysical. Although no concrete documentary evidence has surfaced to confirm the event beyond Gardner's testimony and later Wiccan oral traditions, Operation Cone of Power remains an enduring legend in esoteric history. It stands as an example of how magical practitioners have historically engaged with political and military events, seeing their role not just as spiritual seekers but as active participants in shaping the destiny of nations. The operation also contributed to the mythology surrounding the origins of modern Wicca and strengthened Gardner's claims of an unbroken lineage of British witchcraft that had long played a role in defending the land from external threats. Despite the increasing reliance on technology and advanced warfare strategies in the 21st century, magical beliefs and practices continue to play a role in both state and non-state military operations. In contemporary warfare, spiritual protection rituals, occult-inspired strategies, and the use of esoteric knowledge for psychological operations persist across different cultures and conflicts. So let's now explore its role in more contemporary contexts. Modern military institutions have at times engaged with occult beliefs as part of psychological operations. The use of magic in contemporary warfare is not only limited to individual beliefs, but has also been co-opted by government and military forces as a tool for psychological manipulation. In some instances, Western intelligence agencies and military units have deliberately exploited local magical and religious traditions to influence enemy combatants. During the Vietnam War, the US military allegedly employed psychological warfare tactics rooted in occult fears. One notable example was Operation Wandering Soul, a strategy used by US forces to exploit Vietnamese beliefs in spirits and the afterlife. American troops broadcast eerie, ghostly sounds across the jungle at night, imitating the voices of deceased Vietnamese soldiers lamenting their fates. This tactic leveraged local spiritual beliefs about the Magui, the wandering spirits, to instill fear and demoralize enemy troops. Similar approaches have been documented in the Philippines, where anti communist forces invoked local myths about supernatural creatures such as the Aswang, a vampiric spirit, to frighten insurgents into surrendering. Beyond psychological manipulation, some modern military forces continue to use magical or spiritual protection rituals before combat. African military groups, for example, have been known to incorporate indigenous magical practices into their warfare strategies. Some soldiers in conflicts in Uganda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Sierra Leone have reportedly undergone ritual blessings or consumed protective potions believed to render them impervious to bullets. Guerrilla movements and insurgent groups have historically relied on magical traditions as part of their resistance strategies. In many cases, magic has functioned not only as a means of supernatural protection, but also as a unifying ideological force that reinforces group identity and morale. One of the most prominent examples of magical resistance in modern warfare is the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya from the mid 20th century. The Mau Mau fighters, who resisted British colonial rule, incorporated Kikuyu spiritual traditions into their guerrilla warfare tactics. Oath taking ceremonies, which bound fighters to secrecy and loyalty, were performed in the presence of elders and spiritual leaders and were believed to invoke ancestral protection. Many Mau Mau warriors believed that these oaths and rituals provided them with supernatural invulnerability against British bullets. British colonial authorities, recognizing the power of these beliefs, sought to undermine the spiritual cohesion of the movement by attempting to discredit traditional leaders and disrupt their ritual practices. Similarly, in Haiti, voodoo has played a significant role in resistance movements. During the US occupation of Haiti, Asian insurgents known as Cacos engaged in voodoo rituals before battle, believing that they could summon spiritual forces to aid them against the American military. The US forces, unfamiliar with the depth of voodoo's influence, initially underestimated the resilience of Haitian fighters who saw themselves as empowered by occult forces. While magical traditions are more commonly associated with indigenous and insurgent movements, esoteric beliefs have also found a place within the military structures of modern states. Some contemporary soldiers continue to rely on personal talismans, religious blessings, and rituals for protection in combat. Military chaplains, for example, often perform prayers and blessings before missions, reinforcing the idea that supernatural intervention plays a crucial role in battlefield survival. In some instances, state leaders have sought the guidance of occult practitioners when making military decisions. Reports suggest that certain African and Middle Eastern leaders have consulted spiritual advisors, astrologers, and diviners before launching military campaigns. The advent of digital communication and cyber warfare has introduced new dimensions to magical conflict. Some contemporary magical practitioners have adapted traditional sigil magic to online spaces, using digital symbols as a form of magical resistance. Chaos magicians and cyber occultists have experimented with creating viral sigils, symbols charged with intent, that are spread through digital platforms with the aim of influencing public consciousness and political outcomes. During recent geopolitical conflicts, online magical communities have engaged in collective rituals, synchronizing their intentions through digital platforms to influence political events. For instance, groups of occult practitioners have claimed to use magical operations to disrupt extremist propaganda or counter online psychological warfare efforts. While the efficacy of digital sigils remains debated, these practices represent a modern evolution of war magic, in which esoteric traditions are adapted to contemporary media and information warfare strategies. The concept of information magic suggests that manipulating digital narratives, symbols, and psychological triggers can be as potent in modern warfare as traditional forms of magical intervention. Despite the progression of warfare from the battlefields of ancient Mesopotamia to modern digital and cyber warfare, the use of magic as a tool of both resistance and dominion has remained an enduring theme. Across different time periods and cultures, magic has functioned as a means of acquiring supernatural protection, securing divine favor, and influencing the outcomes of military engagements. Whether through structured, state sponsored magical programs, as seen in Nazi Germany's esoteric experiments, or in grassroots resistance movements, such as the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya, magical practices have continuously shaped the psychological and strategic dimensions of war. Throughout history, magic has served three primary functions in warfare: as a tool of divination to predict and guide military decision, as a protective mechanism designed to shield soldiers and commanders from harm, and as a psychological weapon used to manipulate enemies and bolster morale among one's own troops. These functions have remained remarkably consistent from the ancient world to modern military conflicts, despite changes in technology, weaponry, and battlefield strategies. One of the most striking aspects of war magic is its adaptability. In ancient world, diviners and oracles consulted the will of the gods to determine whether a battle would be victorious, while medieval warriors sought protection through sacred relics and saintly invocations. In the early modern period, cunning folk and astrologers provided military leaders with strategic insight, while colonial forces both suppressed and exploited indigenous magical beliefs. The 20th century saw the rise of state sponsored occult experimentation, alongside resistance movements that used magic as a source of empowerment against imperialist forces. In the contemporary era, magic has evolved yet again, shifting into the digital realm, where cyber occultists and chaos magicians use digital sigils to wage esoteric resistance in online spaces. The persistence of magic in warfare is not just a reflection of supernatural or occult belief, but also a testament to the psychological dimension of war. Fear, uncertainty, and the existential stakes of battle have historically driven soldiers and commanders to seek control over the unknown. Magic offers a sense of agency in the face of overwhelming odds, reinforcing the conviction that unseen forces can intervene in times of crisis. Whether through the protective talismans worn by World War I soldiers, the spirit invoking oaths of the Mau Mau fighters, or the magical Battle of Britain waged through psychic defense, these practices illustrate how belief in the occult serves as both a coping mechanism and a strategic tool in war. Psychological warfare, one of the most sophisticated modern military strategies, also incorporates elements of magic, particularly in its ability to instill fear and uncertainty in an enemy. The US military's use of ghostly sounds to terrify Vietnamese soldiers in Operation Wandering Soul demonstrates how psychological warfare tactics can exploit cultural and supernatural beliefs for strategic advantage. Similarly, British colonial officials sought to counteract indigenous magical resistance by discrediting spiritual leaders and using their own counter magic. These examples show us the ways in which magical thinking has been weaponized, not just by those who believe in it, but also by those who seek to manipulate it. As warfare continues to evolve, so too does the role of magic within it. The growing integration of artificial intelligence, cyber warfare, and digital information campaigns has created new opportunities for occult practices to adapt. The rise of digital sigils and online occult activism demonstrates that esoteric traditions are not disappearing, but rather transforming to fit new technological landscapes. The potential for AI driven magical operations, where artificial intelligence is used to generate and enhance sigils, predictive algorithms, and ritualistic interventions, represents an emerging frontier, possibly in esoteric warfare. Additionally, as belief in conspiracy theories and esoteric frameworks grows in certain political and military circles, there is a possibility that state actors may once again turn to occult advisors, as was seen with John Dee in the court of Elizabeth I, or with Heinrich Himmler's esoteric ambitions during the World War II. So, when it comes to modern statecraft, where psychological influence, narrative control, and ideological warfare are as crucial as physical combat, magic, whether real or perceived, remains a potent force. And with that, my friend, this episode concludes. And obviously, it couldn't be comprehensive because there is so much to cover. And one of these elements will be Julius Evola, which we will have a Magus lecture on this month on my Patreon. So sign up for my Patreon at Magus or higher tier to attend that. We're going to cover Julius Evola, the metaphysics of war, because that's also quite an interesting text to explore the significance of war magic. This is my bibliography. I'm going to show it here. And also you see all the specific references on each slide. And don't forget to come over next week, focusing more on the practical side as well. So I would appreciate you guys coming over because I also want to know what you think about things. And if not, you will still find this video online after it streams. So this is it for today's episode. I hope that it was somewhat helpful. Let me know in the comments and leave me a shield emoji in the comment if you watched until this point, because I suppose that we kind of need some shielding. And yeah, and if you watch until this point, I'm super proud of you. Well done on really wanting to be educated on the topic. And also let me know in the comments what you thought about it. If you liked it, if there is any bit that surprised you, or anything that I missed out. I'm sure that I missed out a lot of things. There's, I mean, the topic of magic in time of war is pretty much endless, so it's impossible not to miss out on things. But let me know what you thought, and what are your thoughts about what kind of magic and how to make magic the most effective when it comes to times of war. So that would be my main interest, because that's going to drive the follow-up episode, the live stream on the practical side of war magic. So let me know that in the comments so that I can take that into account as I prepare for that episode. And yeah, if you can at all, I would really appreciate it if you supported my work, because that's how this project stays alive. And you can do so by sending PayPal donations, joining my fantastic Patreon community. You can check out my services at drangelapuca.com. You can get tutoring sessions with me, one-to-one lectures. You can book me for seminars, workshops, and you can get my courses, and also a translation of Isabella Cortese's book. So there's lots of things that you can find on my website. So check it out at drangelapuca.com. And don't forget to sign up for my newsletter so that we can stay in touch regardless of social media algorithms, which are quite capricious, as we all know. And yeah, if you like this episode, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, activate your notification bell so that you will never miss out on anything that I release, and share this video around so the Symposium can grow. I would really, really appreciate it if you did that. And I just hope that you enjoyed this and that you stay tuned and safe for all the academic fun. Bye for now.